The diet we nowadays have is very carbohydrate focused. We don't really need carbohydrates because if you don't have carbohydrates, your body can get the energy differently from proteins and fats. If we constantly eat, especially carbohydrates and sugar, your body constantly needs to give out the insulin, which makes it work less efficiently over time. When my younger son got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, he was very poorly for quite some time and we didn't really put the dots together. We couldn't really figure out what's wrong with him. He lost a lot of weight, he was always thirsty, and he had to be brought into hospital with an ambulance. He got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I remember that I asked the nurse, but what about his eating? And she just went, oh no, he can eat as normal. Yeah, we tried that for a few months and it just didn't work. And this was the first time where I really saw what an impact it can have on someone's health if you change the nutrition. This is something that we all should be aware of.
Kristina Triebow is a nutritionist and naturopath who helps people to regain their balance with a special interest in the metabolism and blood sugar control. And in this episode, we talk about the impact that certain foods can have on your blood sugar and the issues that can cause for your short-term health as well as your long-term health. Let's get straight into it. Kristina.
Yes.
Can you start by telling us what you do?
Mm-hmm. Hi, Stephen. Nice to be here. I'm a registered nutritional therapist. I'm also a clinical aromatherapist and massage therapist. And I've also done a course in naturopathy, which gives me a bit of a wider holistic approach in my practice. So I mainly focus my therapy on helping and supporting people with health issues using food, nutrition, and lifestyle. And it's very much a personalized and holistic approach where I take into account what their health issues are, what kind of needs they have and the goals they have, and support them to find long-term solutions and also to support their well-being and health in the long term.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about some of the topics we're about to speak about. But just before we do, can you give us some insight? If someone was to, someone that's tuning in right now, can you give them an idea of what type of benefits you would expect them to see if they were to implement some of the things we're about to talk about in regards to nutrition and metabolism, etc.?
Of course, yeah. So in my practice, just to give you some examples, I see a lot of people who have imbalances in their blood sugars. They might be pre-diabetic or have diabetes. They also might be struggling with fatigue. They're often tired, don't really know why that is, don't have enough energy to just get through the day. But there could also be issues like chronic issues or, for example, if you're going through premenopause and menopause and have symptoms there and don't know how to deal with them, and maybe primary care wasn't able to help you. And I kind of, together with them, I investigate, we investigate together what the root cause of the health issues are and try and find the best solution for your case, with a personalized approach by changing your nutrition and maybe give you lifestyle recommendations to improve your life and your well-being, that you're no longer as tired, that you have more energy, that you just re-find your balance again.
Yeah, I love that. And if that was all put in a drug, I think everyone would want that straight away.
Yeah, I think so too.
So can you now just give us some context then to what led you to being so passionate about nutrition? What is the story behind that?
Yes, yeah. So I grew up in Switzerland, if you wonder where my strange accent is from, in the German part of Switzerland. I had a Swedish father who was a chef, And my mother is Italian and loves to cook, and she used to cook a lot. So food and nutrition was always a big part of my life. I was always very interested in nutrition and what, eating well and just the benefits of good nutrition. And but my real passion to really wanting to find out more about how everything works and how food and nutrition can help with certain health issues, that started about 9 years ago when my younger son got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So for you listeners that don't know, type 1 diabetes and the difference with type 2, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition where your own body attacks the cells in your pancreas that produce the insulin. So he was very poorly for quite some time, and we didn't really, put the dots together. We couldn't really figure out what's wrong with him. He lost a lot of weight. He was always thirsty. And, it's hard to admit, but we almost waited too long to action, and go to the hospital. And he had to be brought into hospital with an ambulance. And so he was very poorly, and that's where he got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
How old was he at that point?
He was 11. So it was quite a shock for the whole family, for him, but also for us as parents and his siblings. And I didn't know too much about diabetes in general. I kind of knew, that's an issue with sugar and insulin and things, but I didn't know too much about it. So when the nurses and the healthcare professionals talked to us about the disease and what we need to do, they basically just said, oh yeah, his body can no longer produce insulin, so he needs to inject insulin on a daily basis just that he can live. And I remember that I asked the nurse, but what about his eating? What do we need to take, be aware of? What do we need to change? And she just went, oh no, he can eat as normal. Just continue as normal. Just give the right amount of insulin for what he's eating. And I found that a bit strange, but I thought, okay. We went home and tried to manage his diabetes. We had to calculate all the carbohydrates because that's the carbohydrates, they break down into sugar, and that's where you need the insulin for, so they can go out of your bloodstream into the cells. So we had to do lots of calculations. It was all quite stressful to find out the right amount of insulin to give. And we tried that for a few months, and it just didn't work. His blood sugars went up and down, and it was quite stressful. And this was kind of the time where I just wanted to find out more about all of it. I started reading books and looking online, found support groups of other parents from children with type 1 diabetes, and kind of realized that we might have to look at the issue of the carbohydrates, because the more carbohydrates he eats, the more insulin he needs, and the more difficult it becomes to manage it properly, because you have to make sure that you give enough insulin for the carbohydrates. And read a few books and kind of decided to change our diet in the way that we went more low carb. So we stopped having refined carbs, at home, the pasta and the pizza and sugars and chocolate and things like that. And very quickly kind of realized that the management got a lot easier. And this was kind of the first time where I really saw what an impact it can have on someone's health if you just change the nutrition. So that was quite an aha moment for me.
And when you were so you went back to hospital and they said, eat what you like. You were giving the insulin according to how much that your son was eating. Yeah. But you said that the blood sugars were very much up and down. Was he getting symptoms with that as well?
Yes, yeah. So this is something I didn't really realize either, because when you have normal insulin metabolism, so to speak, when your insulin works normally and you have insulin, then your body regulates everything by itself. It's called homeostasis. It tries to stay in balance. So if you eat a meal that contains carbohydrates, your pancreas releases the insulin that then deals with the carbohydrates. And you usually, your levels are very balanced, basically. But if you have type 1 diabetes where you have no insulin, if you just eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar state just will rise and rise. So you have more and more sugars in your blood. So just to give you maybe an understanding about blood sugar, so it's about 1 teaspoon of sugar that we all have in our bloodstream, in a normal blood sugar environment, is about 1 teaspoon of sugar. And with my son, if he just ate carbohydrates without giving insulin, it would just rise. And your blood sugar would go to 10, 15, 20, until your blood becomes acidic. And this is where it then gets really dangerous and you need to go to hospital. But then on the other hand, if you, for example, give too much insulin, you can go the other way and your blood sugar can drop really low. And this is very dangerous. It can be an acute danger because your brain, for example, is one of the organs that needs the most energy. Is about 20% of the energy you take in goes to the brain. And if you don't have that energy, that sugar that gets converted into energy, your brain can just shut down. So you can lose conscious and you can die. So it's quite serious and it's quite nerve-wracking as well if you then see the blood sugars go up and down and up and down, and you're just always trying to juggle that, that it doesn't get too critical.
Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to ask for a very quick favor, and that is to simply subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you're watching on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then to follow. It is one of the best ways you can help to support this podcast and helps me to keep on making better and better episodes for you. Thank you so much for your support. Back to the episode. And so the main change then through reading some books, you made to your son was reducing not just the sugars, but also the carbs.
Yes, yeah. Because carbohydrates they all break down into sugar. And this is something that I also didn't quite realize before. They all break down into sugars. And another thing was also that we don't really need carbohydrates, because if you don't have carbohydrates, your body can get the energy differently from proteins and fats. And this is something I didn't know before, So yeah, through reading books and educating myself, I kind of realized that we can try a different approach.
So then so therefore, if you're not having, or you're having low carbs and sugar, that means you're going to be naturally increasing your other macronutrients like your proteins and fats.
Yes, yeah.
So how does that then differ in regards to blood sugar compared to having sugar and carbs directly?
Yeah. I think there's still an impact, even for example with protein, if there's no carbohydrates, the protein can convert into sugars. So you still kind of need to take that into consideration. But overall, the management is easier because it's not as, it doesn't spike you that much, and also it doesn't drop that low. So it makes the management a lot easier.
Because I assume it's because the body takes a bit of time to actually convert that protein and fat into sugar. Is it like a slow release type of
Correct,
thing, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And especially the refined carbs, sugar and refined carbs like white rice, white pasta, potatoes, they can spike your blood sugars very quickly. And therefore, it's important to also choose if you're having carbohydrates, to choose carbohydrates that have a slow release. Like, for example, legumes or sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes. Or if you have carbohydrates with more fibers, because fiber then slows down the release as well. And it just doesn't spike you as much. It just gives you a bit, a flatter curve. Yeah.
How does that now look then for your son, eating in this way and managing diabetes,
Yeah.
does he still get any symptoms, or is it quite easy now to manage?
Well, it's tricky with the blood sugar because it's not only the food that can affect your blood sugars. So it's not that easy still, but it's a lot easier. But for example, if he exercises, that can bring his blood sugar up. Well, depending on the exercise, because depending on the exercise, it can also bring his blood sugars down. So it really is very difficult to kind of understand what's going on. And also stress can have an effect, or things like if you go to the sauna, can bring you, or have a hot bath, can bring your blood sugars up. So it's a lot of different things that can have an effect. So you kind of need to manage all of it. If you have a cold, it could affect it as well.
It's amazing actually, because before having to do that, you realize, well, you don't realize, let's say, when you don't have diabetes and you don't have to monitor it and give yourself insulin, is that you, I suppose, really appreciate how much the body's doing. Yeah. And I think I perhaps just underestimated then how the impact of blood sugar on things, actually not just on food. So I'm assuming nowadays, is he wearing a continuous glucose monitor?
He is most of the time, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And that must make it a hell of a lot easier.
It's a lot easier, but it's still important that he finger pricks as well, because it's not, 100% accurate. Often it lags as well, it lags behind a bit. So it's still important that he finger pricks as well. So he has to do that several times a day still. Yeah. But it does help the continuous glucose monitoring, definitely. And also kind of the understanding what kind of foods spike you more than others, because we're all different. And it could be that white rice very much spikes your blood sugar, whereas white rice is fine for me. It isn't as bad. But then if I eat a banana, it really spikes my blood sugar. Everybody's different. So in this regards, the continuous glucose monitors are really handy to kind of understand a bit more about your own body and how certain foods affect it. Yeah.
So what are the most common symptoms then if your blood sugar is, let's say, very dynamic, or maybe is going into really high regions?
It's interesting because, so when you have low blood sugar, it's called, you have a hypo, so hypoglycemic. And if you have high blood sugar, it's hyper. So the names are very similar, but also funnily, the symptoms can be quite similar as well. So if you probably know the feeling when you had, let's say, a carbohydrate-rich lunch, you go for a walk, you use up all the energy because you walk around, and then your blood sugar drops and you get all jittery and weak. You probably had that before. I mean, most of us have experienced that. So these are the symptoms when your blood sugar drops. But with type 1 diabetics especially, it can drop a lot lower, where it then gets more dangerous and more critical. But these are kind of the symptoms. You get jittery, you get weak, you get very hungry. And then on the other hand, when you have high blood sugar, it can be very similar symptoms. You get lethargic, you get weak, you get very hungry. So the symptoms can be quite similar. Yeah.
So if someone's blood sugars all day long are going very high, very low, then pretty much all the symptoms you just mentioned, they're going to be getting at different points in the day, aren't they?
Exactly. The whole day through, and that's the thing. You can get very tired, because it's very tiring as well for the body to go up and down and up and down. You kind of don't have the energy. And you constantly need to, you constantly hungry and need to fuel your body, kind of trying to get the energy back if you're low, for example.
And what about non-diabetics then? What about for a normal person? The impact of high sugar, high carbs. So basically the impact, I assume then the blood sugar is not going to be as dynamic, but it's still going to be more dynamic, isn't it?
And that's the issue a bit if you look at people who are pre-diabetic or have type 2 diabetes, where your insulin doesn't work properly anymore. So your cells still produce insulin, so you're not a type 1 diabetic. but your body just doesn't really know what to do with it and how to best, use it. And this is where you can get very similar symptoms. You can have very high blood sugars. You can also have scenarios where your blood sugar drops quite massively and you get these hypo feelings. And generally very much the symptoms as for type 1 diabetics, that you're weak, that you're hungry, and you kind of feel like you don't have energy to do anything. And then you have the long-term consequences, which is the same for type 1 and type 2. If you have constantly high blood sugar, it can damage your arteries. And then long-term health risk are, for your cardiovascular health. You, for example, your blood circulation gets more difficult or impaired because you have too much sugar in your blood. And you can see that, for example, you can get issues with your feet, where worst cases, then you need to amputate a limb, or you could get issues with your eyes, where you don't have good blood circulations in your eyes anymore, and you could become blind. So quite serious implications, of.
Yeah, my understanding is that, as you mentioned, if you have a low drop, it's an acute. So, I mean, in some ways, it's actually more dangerous because you could go into coma.
It's more acute and you can die. Yes.
And then high blood sugar is less acute, but the long-term effects
that's correct.
are quite bad, and all the things that you mentioned, right? What about for someone like me? So someone like me who is not pre-diabetic, not diabetic, should I be worried about blood sugar?
I think it's good to be aware about blood sugar. And I think it's mainly because how the diet we nowadays have is very carbohydrate focused and based. So we eat quite a lot of carbohydrates, and also kind of our eating patterns have shifted quite a bit, that we eat quite often throughout the day, which means that your body constantly needs to give out insulin. And the issue there is that you can become insulin resistant. What I said earlier, that your body doesn't really know how to deal with the blood sugar anymore and how to use the insulin sufficiently. And this is something that we all should be aware of, that if we constantly eat, especially carbohydrates and sugar, your body constantly needs to give out the insulin, which kind of makes it work less efficiently over time.
So the risk for me would be the long-term risk of developing diabetes.
Yes, correct.
Is there a short-term benefit for me, though, to reduce sugar and reduce carbs to stabilize my blood sugar?
So when the whole family went low carb, when we ate fewer carbs, this is one of the symptoms or the benefits, I should say, I really noticed myself. Within a week, I stopped having those afternoon dips where I was just so tired and, didn't have any energy. And it was interesting because before that, I always thought it's normal. And we're supposed to have those afternoon, I can't do anything anymore. But it's actually not, And that was quite a surprise because, this is one, I think probably the main benefit that I saw, that you really have a lot more energy throughout the day. Because it's constant energy, you get from your proteins and your fats, and you don't spike your blood sugar with carbohydrates and then drop after 2 hours and need more energy again. And this is definitely a huge benefit that I saw.
And it's interesting what you said there about you thought that it was normal. And I think there's loads of things that we think are normal. Yeah. I'll give you one example, and that was I was getting a lot of fillings. And you can't, to some degree, I think I feel like my parents did this. They, going to the dentist, you go for a while, and then you get a filling, and then you go for a while, and then again you need a filling. And so, well, hold on, what can we do to stop this process? And so I had in my early 20s, I was getting filling after filling after filling. I thought, something's not right here, and I wasn't getting a lot of advice to how to stop it. Usually, the advice was less sugar in your diet. And brush and floss. But after some further research, I thought, well, that's clearly not enough because, well, firstly, that's clearly not enough because it's not working. But then there's lots of things I implemented. And one of them is one of the things that you actually just mentioned just now, and that is not eating as regularly. And so one of the biggest impacts on my health is having eating sessions. And so the other thing you mentioned was how fiber slows down that blood sugar. So my philosophy is so for example, if I go for coffee and they sometimes give me a biscuit, I'll put that in my pocket. And when I have my next meal, I have that biscuit after the meal because I'm like, well, this is a one session. It's not only good for, as you said, that the insulin is not going to be as regular across the day, but also it's good for my teeth because then I don't have to, that's the other problem about eating regularly is that your saliva keeps having to kind of replace itself every time. So there's just so many benefits to not eating as regularly.
But we kind of have the impression, or also we are told that we need to eat regularly and all the time. I mean, it's also with advertisement and marketing that is so much pushed, oh, you need a snack, kind of you think, oh, I need a snack, I can't leave the house without a snack. But we don't really, our bodies are fine if we don't eat for 4, 5, 6 hours. That's why also it's called breakfast, isn't it? Because you break your fast where you don't eat the whole night. So your body needs that as well to do the digestion and do all these other things. You don't need to constantly eat.
And I think that where we probably got that, as you say, is the food industry, and probably more specifically is those that are selling snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
In the same way that the phrase that I think a lot of us, or particularly the past generation, took as gospel was breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which came from Kellogg's. And when you realize that, you think, well, they want to sell me breakfast. Of course they're going to say that. And you realize, and then if you look at the type of breakfast they sell, it's quite horrendous.
Not the best, no.
So that brings me then on to the how. So let's start with what is the most important thing. So let's say someone is I appreciate obviously everyone is very different, and that's where you have your one-to-one clients. But let's say you take your typical person that doesn't know a lot, not particularly, maybe eating a very typical British diet. Yeah. What do you think is the easiest and most impactful thing they could do straight away that's going to have a benefit to them?
Yeah, I think what I always suggest, especially nowadays, is being aware of how much processed food that we eat, and kind of being aware how kind of reliant we've almost become a bit, because it is convenient, and but it's not the best food for us, and it contains a lot of sugar. It contains a lot of unhealthy fats and a lot of other ingredients that we shouldn't have. So I think the first step and the biggest focus should always be of focusing on whole foods. I think that's my first advice that I always give, to really focus on whole foods.
That's good. Can you give then an example or some examples of ultra processed or the processed foods, and then give some examples of the whole foods?
So there's like this, it's called the NOVA classification, that gives the classification for the processed foods and unprocessed foods. And it's basically 4 categories where you have unprocessed food, minimally processed, processed, and ultra processed. And I can maybe give you an example that unprocessed food is any whole foods, for example, an apple is an unprocessed food. And then if you look at minimally processed, it's things like olive oil, for example, or just things that are just slightly processed or put into jars or cans. And then if it's a bit more processed, you look at things like cheese, where the process to produce cheese is a bit longer and you might add some things. And then ultra processed is almost like where you don't recognize the foods. It's all your biscuits and the cakes and, everything where they just put maximum amount of sugar, fat and salt, and that really also make you addicted to that food. And so you buy more and more. And convenience food, you don't have to cook anything anymore. You can just grab it from the shelves and eat it.
Yeah, because my perception is that one of the difficulties is that people don't always know what is healthy and what isn't healthy. Yeah. And there's a couple of adverts going around, and I cringe every time I see it. One is, I think it's the Ribena advert. Mm-hmm. And they claim that they have vitamin C, which is probably true. It's probably artificial. And they claim this is a healthy drink. Yeah. And then there's another one, which is the Muller advert. Mm. This guy was eating a Muller yogurt thing. Yeah. And then his wife, I think, looks over his shoulder and says, "Oh, look at you being healthy." It's like... And so, and a lot of people obviously be like, "Oh, okay, of course that's not healthy." But I think a lot of people
don't know, because they tell you it's healthy. So why wouldn't you believe them? No, I mean, so it makes me quite angry, I must say. And it's hard to listen to ads and see all the marketing for unhealthy foods, and they really find, more and more ways of how they can sell things. And it's always the newest fad and the newest thing that they try and sell you. And, for example, if, you have to go gluten-free, and then all the processed food is suddenly gluten-free, or at the moment it's very much focus on protein. And then they add everything with added protein and so much protein. But then it's also all the other things that are not great for you in there. So it's better to just have some meat or fish, for your protein.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a good point about the gluten-free, actually, because you can go gluten-free and just eat things that are naturally gluten-free rather than getting the process. And I think even I, at one point, a long time ago, used to think, "Oh, it's gluten-free, it's healthier." Yeah, exactly. But then actually look at what's in it. A lot of it's ultra-processed, isn't it?
And I've listened to a presentation once, which was quite good and interesting, and it was titled "The Dangers of a Gluten-Free Diet." And first I thought, what does that mean? I thought it's good to go gluten-free. But then it was about that you then switch to the gluten-free processed foods and kind of have more of those because you think it's healthier because they're gluten-free, whereas then you don't really, have a healthier diet with that. Yeah.
Okay. So, and actually that process of going from, because I heard a stat that I think for Americans, around the average American, 60% of their diet is ultra-processed. Yes, yeah. So to go from that level of eating ultra processed or just processed even to then having 100% unprocessed, or at least not having the bad ultra processed, it's not an easy step, is it?
No, it's not easy.
How do we get there?
I think you have to do it slowly, step by step. And I think awareness is the best first approach, just being aware of what's in food. And this is probably good where you start reading labels and kind of figuring out what's in the food you're buying. And it can vary quite a lot, and it's just sometimes little things that you don't really even see that there's a difference. For example, if you look at yogurt, there's so many different yogurts. So you have the yogurts where they add a lot of sugar, so you don't want that. So it's kind of clear which ones those are. But then you have Greek yogurt. And if you don't read the things correctly, you maybe miss that one of the yogurts is Greek-style yogurt and the other one is real Greek yogurt. It's just the little things. So then it helps if you look at the labels and kind of figure out what else is in there. Is it just milk? Is there, what else is in there? Is how much sugar does it have in it?
Yeah, I've become very obsessed at looking at labels. Yeah. I think I do it with everything. And there are certain foods actually I now make myself because I find it very difficult to find a healthy version of it in the shops. Bread being being one of them.
Yeah.
To find bread without a whole load of sugar or additives.
It's very difficult. It's almost impossible.
Yeah. The closest I came to was Sainsbury's and going to their bakery section.
Yes,
and they had ones that are actually very good, I thought. And my strategy was, so now I make my own bread in a bread machine, which is crazy easy. Yeah. I mean, the bread machine, literally 10, 15 minutes, 3 hours later, I've got a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And my strategy...
And that's the best, isn't it? Because you know what's in it.
Yeah. And it tastes amazing.
Yeah.
It tastes way better than the other breads. Yeah.
Yeah.
But my strategy there, because obviously with fresh bread, it goes stale quickly. I chop it up and then I put it in the freezer. Yeah. And then I've got it for the whole week. Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's small, it's bit by bit. And I've definitely noticed that with myself is that, and actually it's taken, if I think about it, it's really taken years. Yeah. I just focus on one different thing at a time. Okay, so let's say then we've got to a point of eating real food.
Good.
What's the second most important thing?
I would probably say figuring out what's best for you, because as we discussed before, everybody is different. And it really depends on your health issues, but also your health goals, on what you could and should eat. So it's kind of figuring that out for yourself. Yeah.
And how, because you need to figure it out, you need some kind of feedback, don't you? So what are some of the ways that we can actually figure that out, whether something's good or bad for us?
Yeah. So it is by, for example, having a food diary, writing down what you eat throughout the day and how you feel, what symptoms you have after you've ate a certain food. If you have any symptoms showing up, and noting that down and maybe seeing a pattern and just trying to figure out which foods work best for you. Yeah. And I do understand it's difficult to do that by yourself, and that's kind of where I come in as a nutritional therapist as well, to support you on this way. And also maybe have a bit more options to hand, like, for example, doing functional testing, where you can really find out a bit more what's going on, let's say with your hormones or with your blood sugar or whatever, that where you need support with, to find out a bit more details. For example, how your vitamin levels are, if you need more minerals, just in general, what's going on.
When you say functional testing, do you mean like taking a blood test? Or?
Blood test, yeah, for example. There are many different kind of tests that you can do. For example, if you have symptoms of indigestion a lot, issues with your digestion and stomach issues, then maybe a gut test might be more beneficial for you. If you have issues with your hormones, if you're in that perimenopausal state and lots of menopause symptoms, hot flushes and so, then maybe a hormone test might be the best option. So there's many different forms of testing you can do. Even genetic testing, can be really useful if you want to really get down to the root of the issues and see what works best for you.
And this is really something for the average person. They'll probably need someone like yourself to guide them through that, because
correct, yes, yeah.
Finding the test is not easy, and then interpreting the test and
correct
what to do with it.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got eating real food, personalizing it for you, finding out what works. And what's the next important thing?
I think next important bit is looking at lifestyle. And with lifestyle, I mean everything apart from nutrition, your stress, your sleep, your movement, are you doing exercise? What kind of exercise is best for you? Things like that. And especially stress is, we live in quite a stressful world, and so many stresses we experience every day, constantly, and this takes a toll on our health. So it's very important to look at stress and how to manage stress and bring stress down.
What impact does stress have then on the blood sugar?
It can have a huge impact, yeah. So it can also be an issue with your insulin, your insulin sensitivity can impact that. It can drive, for example, cortisol, stress hormones can drive your blood sugars up.
Okay, so is stress more likely to bring the sugar up?
Up, correct.
Or
yes.
is it the fact that it's more variable?
It usually brings your blood sugar up, yes.
And that makes sense, because if you're stressed, you're almost like, if you're running away from a tiger, you need more energy.
Exactly. You're exactly right, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Which is okay if you're running away from a tiger, but if it's constant, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it?
No, that's exactly the issue we have nowadays. We just have constant stress. Might not be such a big stress like a tiger attacking you, but it's constant little stresses, and it's very difficult to just to rest. People kind of also forgot a bit how to rest, and it's important to rest. And just I like to just watch a good movie in the evenings and just lie a bit on the sofa, but it's not actually resting.
We're still getting that constant stimulation, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that makes sense actually to some degree, because I've heard it said I've seen a pattern anecdotally that stress can precede a lot of conditions, such as cancer is one of them. And I was just thinking that through, that one of the things with cancer is a sugar actually is a big factor. And we know that if you reduce your blood sugar, or you control it better, the cancer tumor grows slower. So it makes sense that then stress, if it increases your sugar levels, could almost like tip you over the edge. Thinking, really putting the two together there. So what about then diet? Because there's a lot of different diets out there. Let's start with the low-fat diet, because that's one that I think the food industry has pushed for decades.
Yeah,
with all
they really pushed that one.
Yeah, where has that got us?
Where did it get us? Well, first of all, I'm not an English native speaker, but so for me maybe it's a bit different. But I really don't like the word diet, because for me it always sounds like it's something you use to lose weight, but it should be kind of a lifestyle, a way of living and eating. But low-fat diets. I think that's where it all went a bit wrong in the last, few years, since the 1970s, more or less. And the focus has shifted kind of eating just normal healthy fats to not eating fats and just putting sugar everywhere. And I think that was very detrimental to our health, because we need fat. We don't need sugar, but we need fat, but we need the right kinds of fat. And I think now, even now after all these years, it's still very much the preconception is that fat is bad, fat will make you fat, and you shouldn't have fat, which is not true.
The problem is that logically that makes sense, doesn't it? That if I eat fat, I'll gain fat, and particularly if you bleed that for a long time.
Doesn't really. That's the thing.
That's the problem. And I suppose if you bleed that for a long time, firstly it's hard to break that. But secondly, it's like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. If I take in fat, I'll gain fat. But we know that doesn't work.
I think we've also been focusing too much on calories. This calorie in, calorie out model that is also not really working as they say it is. It's 100 calories of broccoli is not the same, doesn't have the same effect on you as 100 calories of chocolate. Do you know what I mean? So it shouldn't only be the focus on calories. And with fat, I think it's really the misconception that if you eat fat, it makes you fat. Whereas it is technically the sugar, the too much energy from sugar, because insulin, the hormone that we secrete to deal with all that sugar, is also called the fat storing hormone. So insulin makes your body store the excess energy into your fat cells, and that's how you then become overweight and obese. If there's too much energy, too much sugar and carbs that your body cannot deal with, and just stores it.
Would you say then the most effective way to lose weight is actually to focus on reducing the sugar rather than reducing the fat?
It can have quite a beneficial effect, yes, if you reduce carbohydrates and sugar. I'm not saying that you can eat however much fat you want, First of all, you should concentrate on the healthy fats, and not all fats are healthy. And also because fat is very energy dense. So if you go back to the calories, it has a lot more calories than, for example, carbohydrates and protein. You will also gain weight if you eat a lot of fat. It's not that you don't gain weight from fat, but it's more beneficial if you're reducing carbohydrates and sugar if you want to lose weight. And this is because of insulin. Yeah, because if you reduce carbohydrates and sugar, you reduce your insulin. And if you reduce your insulin, your body stops storing the energy into your fat cells and can start using the fat that you already have as energy. And that's where you then start losing weight.
So what is then the healthy fats? What type of fats should we be focusing on?
Yeah, so there are different kinds of fat. I would probably say the healthiest fats, you're looking at omega-3, which you can find in fatty fish, is very anti-inflammatory. You find it in fatty fish, in certain nuts as well. Then you have the monounsaturated, like olive oil, which is really healthy as well, which is often, advertised, for example, for the Mediterranean diet, where people say that's why the Mediterranean diet is so healthy, because it's very much focused on having olive oil. You then have polyunsaturated fats like certain nuts, walnut oil or other nut oils, which are good. Then you kind of have the fats that are a bit neutral, like saturated fat. And I personally think that saturated fat has had a really bad press as well, and which I don't think is warranted, that it has a bad rep. And it can be beneficial for you as well. You need saturated fat as well. The same goes with omega-6 oils, which is your body needs omega-6 oils, but you shouldn't have too much. And the issue nowadays is that all the fats that are used in processed food, for example, is mostly vegetable oils, seed oils that are rich in omega-6, which then kind of gives you an imbalance in the omega-3, omega-6 ratio. So it should be that you eat a lot more omega-3 fatty acids than omega-6. But it doesn't mean that omega-6 is bad. It's not bad, but you shouldn't have as much.
Yeah, and the problem is, as you said, we're eating too much of the omega-6. So therefore, what we say is omega-6 is bad. Yeah. But actually what you're saying is, well, we do need it. Yeah. It's just that we need to get the ratio
exactly,
right between omega-3 and omega-6.
And that's very difficult nowadays, especially if you eat a lot of processed foods, because it's mainly with seed oils. And then with seed oils, there's another issue, that it's highly processed, highly refined, and it can give your body oxidative stress, which then adds, on top of having way too much omega-6 oils. It's also, it's not good for your body because it can be inflammatory.
Yeah, seed oils is a really interesting one, because I feel that there is generally now becoming more of a consensus for, say, not doing a low-fat diet. Mm-hmm. That's becoming a little bit more obvious. Yeah. But what's not, doesn't have the same level of consensus is seed oils, because you have people that are very knowledgeable saying seed oils are really bad. And then you have another group of people saying, actually, there's no issue with it. But what I fail to see people differentiate is the difference between a seed oil that is cold pressed, mechanically pressed, and a seed oil that is highly processed, as you mentioned, because you only have to just know a little bit about the highly processed to think, I'm staying away from that. But it's the same with olive oil, though, isn't it? I mean, you can have highly processed olive oil that actually is not going to be healthy, and then you can have cold pressed.
That's very true. Yes, yeah. And there again, you kind of need to look at the composition of the oils as well. If it's a cold pressed rapeseed oil, it will still be high in omega-6. So maybe have it once in a while, but don't go overboard and only have cold pressed rapeseed oil. It's good to mix it up a bit. But definitely if it's highly processed, and I've seen pictures and videos of how they produce the seed oils, the vegetable oils, it's not something you want to eat, or have in your food.
It doesn't really fall under the unprocessed category you talked about earlier, does
not
it?
at all.
That's the problem.
Not at all.
But yes, and okay, so and then if the seed oil is mechanically pressed, obviously it's much better, but that's probably where the personalized nutrition comes in, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because if you're having, it depends on what else you're eating. If you're having a lot of things that are high in omega-6, then you might say, maybe we're better not to have that and have something else.
Good point. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely true.
Yeah. Okay. What about inflammation? And again, I suppose this is where personalized diet comes in, but inflammation is something that a lot of people, I think, struggle with, whether they're being diagnosed or not. What would you say the most important thing is to help reduce inflammation?
I think first it's good to understand what inflammation is. And acute inflammation, if you cut yourself, and your immune system, makes everything to heal you, this is acute inflammation, which is good for your body. It needs this acute inflammation to deal with the issue at hand. However, if inflammation gets chronic, then there is an issue, and it can be at the root of so many health problems. It can lead to cardiovascular issues. It can lead to cancer, so many things where inflammation is. It doesn't mean that inflammation is the only cause, but you see it more and more that inflammation is the root cause of so many chronic diseases nowadays. Yeah.
And is there a certain food type or type of food that is commonly associated with inflammation that we should avoid?
Definitely. It's the processed food, ultra processed food, highly refined carbohydrates, sugar, seed oils, all these things are very pro-inflammatory, and it's good to try and avoid them and focus on anti-inflammatory foods such as healthy fats, olive oil, avocados, have enough protein and lots of fruits and vegetables. But then also you need to look at environmental factors, and that's where it then gets complicated because a lot of it is difficult to control. With food is such a good medium because you have control of what you eat, you can control the food you take in. But a lot of other things, it gets a bit more difficult. For example, the air quality, air pollution is difficult to avoid. You kind of need to move somewhere else if you have a lot of air pollution. Or pesticides, So many pesticides are used nowadays. And of course, you can try and buy organic wherever you can, which is best. But it's also a cost factor, It's not cheap to buy organic produce. And then maybe there it's important to know what kind of vegetables and fruits are more, where pesticides are more used, where it's better to buy organic, and other fruit and vegetables where it doesn't matter that much because, for example, they have a thick skin, like an avocado, where you can just buy a normal avocado, don't have to go organic, and things like that, where you can try and minimize the exposure to toxic things that can, increase your risk of inflammation.
Yeah, so it's very multifactorial, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was interesting. My mum's been starting to grow things in her garden, and she was telling me how she got loads of strawberries.
Yeah.
But she said, I think it was something like a third of them she had to throw away because they had like worms and different things in them.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And then it triggers my memory or my mind to think, I believe strawberries are one of the more highly sprayed.
That's. I think that's number one.
Is it?
Yeah, number one spot, strawberries.
And you can see why.
Yeah. And also things like spinach, everything that's really exposed and that gets sprayed a lot, that otherwise gets eaten by other animals or whatever. It's best to buy organic if you can.
I never see organic strawberries actually in the supermarket.
No, it's very difficult to find.
Yeah, I assume it's because it's difficult
I usually
to grow.
get them from the farm directly. Yeah, and then you can also, chat with the people that work on the farm and make sure that they don't get sprayed. So there are a few farms around here that sell strawberries that are kind of organic. They might not have the label as being organic because it's quite a process and it's a cost as well for the farms to get that label. But, if you speak with them and ask them, do you spray your produce? And hopefully you get an honest answer. Yeah.
Do you think it's worth getting your meat from the farm shop?
Definitely, yes, yeah.
Because it's quite a big increase in cost, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, I think if you look at how meat is produced, it's not a nice thing to see, how these... I think it's not as much an issue here in the UK as, for example, in America, where you have these big factories and... the animals are not kept very nicely. But I think it's very important to look at everything, how the animals are kept, if they can go out, what do they eat? It's very important, and it's worth paying a bit more for that, yeah. Okay. It's not cheap, but I think it's worth doing that, yeah.
What about health-wise then for us? Do you think there's a big difference in having meat from farm shop?
Well, there again, you can see a bit better the quality of the meat in regards to, for example, the composition of the fats, for example. So usually meat that is from grass-fed animals are higher in omega-3 than omega-6. Whereas factory, held animals, they get a lot of grains and stuff like that. And then their omega-6 content is a lot higher than omega-3.
So that could be one thing contributing to the higher levels of inflammation. Yeah. And particularly if you suffer with that, that's a good thing to focus on.
Yeah. So it's worth paying a bit more. Yeah. I know it's costly, but I think it's probably better to eat a little bit less meat, but get proper meat. Yeah. Mm.
What about supplements?
Supplements, yeah. Good topic. So supplements, I don't like to just throw any supplements at my clients. I don't think, I wouldn't say they're not needed, because nowadays it's getting more and more difficult to get the right amount of nutrients from our foods, because the soil is often depleted, doesn't have enough nutrients anymore, and then we don't get enough nutrients from the food. This, unfortunately, is quite a sad fact. So it really depends on what you need, what your body needs and how your levels are. And this is where the testing comes in handy again, to see if you need supplements and what kind. But for example, one supplement I always recommend is vitamin D, especially if you live in the UK with the weather we have here. So we just don't get enough sun. And there as well, unfortunately, we have been told now for many years that it's dangerous to go into the sun. You should put lots of sun cream on, where you then don't get the vitamin D. So a lot of us are deficient in vitamin D.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong belief out there as well, that the sun is bad. And I am the type of person, and I think perhaps like yourself, that would start with the notion that natural is best until proven otherwise.
Exactly.
And the idea of going into the sun being bad for me, I'm just like, what?
It's just bizarre, isn't it? I mean, how? Why?
I assume that the main reason is because we know that the excess, like anything really, the excess of sun is bad. And I think that's where the skin cancer comes in.
And you shouldn't burn your skin, don't go into the sun for hours until you're red like a lobster, it's not what you should do.
Yeah, and in the UK, it's not many days you could actually burn yourself anyway. So it's really more about being sensible. But yeah, vitamin D, that's interesting. I think that's been my difficulty with supplements is that I learn about the benefits of a supplement. I think, oh yes, maybe this could benefit me because I have this or that, or I'm struggling with this. So let's try and take it. And then most often I don't see a big difference. So then inevitably then I stop doing it. And so I do agree actually. I think that supplements, you really need some kind of measure to know what you're doing.
It needs to be personalized, and you need to kind of know what you need to take, and certain things you shouldn't take. Certain supplements you can't take with certain medication. And a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are on medication nowadays. And then they just get supplements over the counter without realizing that they shouldn't take these supplements because they kind of have an effect on the medication, and the medication doesn't work properly anymore or works too much. It's really important to be aware of that and get the right supplements, and also only if you need supplements.
And actually if you do think you need a certain vitamin or mineral, you're probably better just to look at foods that naturally have it in, aren't you?
Correct, yes.
And it's harder to go wrong with that as well.
Very true. Mm-hmm.
What about the quality of supplements then?
That as well is important to be aware that there are certain supplements that are not of good quality. A lot of fillers in them and might not even work that well, So it's good to go for supplements for companies that really do their, are evidence-based as well, that can really have the evidence of why their supplements work and that they actually do work. So that's very important.
It's hard when you're looking. I think the main thing I do look for is a reputable company. But the problem is that like any product, they're always going to try and sell it and make it look good. Is there anything that you can look at, like particularly if you're looking at the ingredients or anything about the supplement that helps you gauge as to whether it's good or not?
Well, I think often it's the price, isn't it? If you go for really cheap supplements, then often they're not that good. So you do need to spend a bit more money. The ones that really are from proper companies that do actually work, they cost a bit more because they have the proper stuff in them now. And for me, it's easier now because I have the suppliers I work with that I know have good quality and do their the reports, the research that is needed they can prove and show that the supplements work for what they say you should take them for.
So we spoke about a variety of things there. Is there anything on your mind that you're thinking, actually, we need to talk about this?
I think we talked about a lot of the, most important things. I think for me is really at the moment is getting people to be a bit more excited about whole foods again, getting into the kitchen and appreciating, that you can create a meal from scratch with proper food, And I do understand it's difficult for some people, and also you often don't get, taught anymore nowadays how to cook and prepare food. But it's so important. I was lucky growing up in Switzerland that it was an integral part in the school curriculum that we went to the allotment, got the produce there, went into the kitchen then, and they taught us how to cook, and I really appreciated that. And it was a valuable life lesson, I think, that every child should get. So it's just getting people excited about food again, and also seeing the impact that food can have on your health, and also it's in your control what you eat, and you can be in control of your health, and you can refine your balance again.
I think that is I think underestimated for a lot of people, the impact that food can have on your body. I think that's maybe one of the biggest issues, and certainly if we did have more education in schools on actually how to cook, because I think education is a big one. A lot of people don't know actually how to, and the thing about cooking is actually it's not, you can obviously be a really great chef, but to get from like not being able to cook to being able to cook basic good food it's not a huge step really, is it?
But still, you kind of need to take the first step, and it's not, it can be daunting, isn't it, if you don't know how to cook.
My wife and I, both of us, are not enthusiastic about cooking, but we do it because, well, firstly, we prefer our own food, but also we know it's better. But I know that the biggest stumbling block because we often actually, I think our dinners, our mealtime, the food that we make is quite limited, and we'll very happily make, the way that we get around not cooking as often but staying healthy is making a batch of food for a few days, and then we have it.
That's really good. Yeah.
But what I know that the biggest hindrance for me is that, yes, I can go and find another recipe, but I've not made it before. And if I've not made it before, I know it's going to require more energy. And therefore I'm like, no, I'll just stick to something I know. And if all you know is bad food, it's then really hard.
Yeah, no, and I get that. It's not easy, and you kind of need to push yourself a bit as well and try new things and just experiment a bit, And it does come with practice then, if you do it more and more, you kind of realize it doesn't really matter what I put together, You know what I mean? You can change maybe the spices a bit, and then you already have a whole new dish, So it can be fun as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I would say that and I've been on as you say, you've got to make small changes. And I think that is the way really I've been doing it my whole life. And I would say that I enjoy my food so much more now than I did 5 years ago. And so I think there is a misconception there also that healthy food has to be not nice food, but I would argue actually it's nicer food, plus you get the benefits from it.
It tastes a lot better, I think. I think if you eat a lot of processed food, your taste buds, they get really, it's very bland food, isn't it? It's a lot of just sugar, fat, salt, but you can't really taste anything anymore, And it's one thing I'd like to add, which I read somewhere, which I found so interesting, is, for example, with crisps, just to give you an example, how the marketing has worked with these big food companies that want to sell you more and more processed food, is they, for example, flavor it with meat flavor, like a barbecue crisp or something. And you eat it because your body craves protein, craves meat, needs the protein. But there's just a flavor. So you can't stop eating because you want more and more, because your body's just not getting the protein. And that's kind of how they get you, to buy more of their food. And you don't get anything. You don't,
Yeah, I definitely find that with crisps, actually.
It's a lot with other things, with the sugary things. It's so addictive, and it's really difficult to stop eating.
I really want to talk about breakfast because I mentioned earlier that the slogan from Kellogg's, which was breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And well, firstly, do you think that's true? And secondly, well, let's start with that. Is it true? And how important is the first thing you put in your stomach?
I think in general, it's very important what you put in, it doesn't matter at what time and when. I wouldn't say that breakfast is the most important meal. I also wouldn't say that everybody needs to have breakfast. Again, it very much depends on what you need, and everybody is different, So for example, some people, they might do really well not having breakfast and just continue to fast until lunch, There are certain people, they only eat once a day. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm also not saying you have to eat like that. It really depends on how you do best, For some people, it's beneficial to have breakfast. And there, it's important what kind of breakfast you're having. And of course, the cereals, not good, It's highly processed, full of sugar, full of salt, and doesn't give you the energy that you need throughout the day. That's the main thing, gives you a sugar high, your blood sugar goes up, spikes, and then after 2 hours, you're hungry again because your blood sugar dropped. And I think if you want to have breakfast, then it's good to include protein, enough protein, and some healthy fats to bring you, to give you enough energy until your next meal.
Yeah, I mean, that's really been the biggest problem, is that I would think that the majority of people would have cereal. That's what I that's what
That's
I had.
how we grew up, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
I grew up with cereals as well.
And it's because no one really said anything otherwise. Yeah. We listened to what was advertised and thought, well, food is food.
Healthy breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. The advertising is healthy. Oh. Yeah, I mean, I've heard it been said that if they claim it's healthy, likelihood is it's not healthy, and you want to stay away from it.
Read the label.
Yeah, because natural food doesn't tend to brag about itself, does it? So, so what? And then what about fasting? Mm-hmm. So intermittent fasting, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at when not having breakfast, i.e., not having the meal in the morning. Do you think that's beneficial for everyone?
I think it's beneficial for everyone to have a certain amount of time where you don't eat. And usually that's at night when you sleep, So I think it's important to stop, to maybe have your last meal 3-4 hours before you go to bed. So your body kind of gets a chance to deal with all of that before you sleep. And, you don't have to eat first thing when you wake up. So the fasting period is beneficial for everybody. If you then fast longer than that, it really depends, again, what your body needs. It can be a great tool, especially in weight loss, if you add intermittent fasting, where you, for example, just extend the fasting period a bit longer. So, for example, you say you have dinner at 6 in the evening and then you don't eat until 10, 11 the next day, which is quite a long fasting period, especially nowadays where we tend to eat a lot more often, and can be a good tool for weight loss. Can also be beneficial for other things, health-wise, but not everybody does well with fasting for a long amount of time. Especially I saw it with myself, but also with other women. With the hormones, sometimes it's better to eat a bit more often throughout the day.
And I know for my brother, example, he was doing for quite a while, I think he was doing intermittent fasting and eat around midday. But then he started to get a very intense job. Doing tree surgery, and he found that was, although he really tried, I think he really tried to push through it, I think he found that was actually unsustainable because the amount of energy his body needed, and he just obviously didn't have it. So I suppose that's personalized. I know, so for me, my main health motivator, I mean, I'm motivated anyway, but one of the main motivations is for my teeth. And interestingly, if you try and improve the health of your teeth, most of those things also improve the health of your body. And one of the things that I realized is that, as I mentioned earlier, I need to have eating sessions. But then, as you said, what I try and do is have my last meal as early as I can. So it's usually before 6, ideally. And then I make sure I don't have anything in the evening. And then when I wake up, I just eat as late as I can. And it's actually not that difficult because, so you can easily get a 14-hour fast.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And you've been sleeping for most of that. So it's not a difficult thing to do. But the thing that I found is discipline, because it might get to 8 in the evening. I get a bit bored. Oh, let's just have a snack. And there'll be quite a lot of evenings we'll have crisps. And that was the worst thing for my teeth. And not to mention your blood sugars.
Well, your health overall, isn't it? But it's often as well just a habit, isn't it? Or when we're bored, we just eat, or because we used to eat at that time, so we just eat. But I find it interesting because I've done a few fasting times where it was an extended fast, like for 1 or 2 days even. And it's interesting because you always think you get hungry because you don't eat, but it's kind of the opposite, you don't really are hungry. And it's also quite fascinating because you tend to get a lot of energy as well. And really your mind gets really focused. So once in a while, I'll do a bit of longer fast just to get that benefit. But it's not something that me personally that I can do often. It's just not great for me. But as I said, everybody is different. And some people do really well on regular fasts that go a bit longer. But I think people need to be aware that nothing happens if you don't eat for a day, And we're all a bit overfed anyway. So if we don't eat for a day, it's not that,
No,
we starve.
Yeah, we've been designed like that, haven't we? I mean, if we think
Exactly.
about when we used to hunt food, you would probably only eat once a day or something. So, and you still need to have the energy to actually hunt that food.
Yeah, so. And that's where the blood sugar comes in, because if we then went hunting and found some carbohydrate-rich foods like not a pot, but some honey up the tree, then your body is programmed to store it immediately as fat, because you need it then for the other periods when you have no food anymore, And this is the whole mechanism then that gives us the issues nowadays, where we just store all the energy as fat.
I'd like to get some insight into actually what you eat.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe let's go through, I mean, I appreciate days vary, but can you take me through maybe a typical day of, from when you wake up to when you go to bed?
Of course, yeah. And as I said, everybody's different. So, my way of eating might not be the best for you. So I like to have breakfast. I had periods where I tried to, tried longer fasting, but it's not for me. So I like to have breakfast in the morning. So I usually get up, have a herbal tea, and then have breakfast about 2 hours later. So I don't eat immediately when I get up. So I tend to do exercises first in a fasting state. That's where I feel the best to do my movement of the day. And then I have breakfast after that, where I try to get at least 30 grams of protein, which is quite important for me to get enough protein. That gives me the energy throughout the day, but also because, especially if I have been exercising, to get that in as building blocks, for my muscles.
And what time does that end up being when you eat?
It's usually around 9:30 that I eat breakfast. And I try to switch it up. I don't have the same breakfast every day. Sometimes I have eggs with some meat. Sometimes I have maybe some chia pudding with some oats. Or I really like skyr yogurt, which is high in protein, but not too rich. So I have that with maybe some fruit or some nut butter. So I really like to switch it up for breakfast.
So, and your main aim is to make sure that the protein is high.
Is my main aim. Yeah.
And fat as well, or mainly protein?
Healthy fats, yeah. Okay. And I tend to eat low carb-ish. So I might have some oats, but I no longer have bread or things like that, because it doesn't go well with me. It's too many carbs for me. And then for lunch, I maybe have a salad or a soup when it's a bit colder in winter. Very much focused on protein again. So I try to get 30 grams of protein with every meal, if I can. Sometimes it's difficult, So I might add an avocado to my salad, or some hard-boiled eggs, or some fish, some smoked mackerel, some salmon, things like that. And then I might have a snack in the afternoon. Depends if I need a bit more energy. If I have a snack, I might have some dark chocolate, might have some nuts or a fruit. This is usually the snacks I have if I feel like I need a snack. And for dinner is very much protein based again. So it might be a piece of meat or some fish and some vegetables. Yeah, maybe some potatoes, but not very often.
That's been in the UK. That's been quite a standard dinner actually for quite a long time. Is your meat, your potato, and your veg,
exactly.
Which actually is quite a good meal. Yeah,
exactly. And then I eat early, so I eat around 6, and I don't eat after that. So I don't like to eat in the evening. I don't feel well if I eat later than that. But as I said, everybody's different. You know, my husband is the exact opposite. He doesn't eat until 2 in the afternoon, and then he eats later, and he eats some more food after dinner. So we're complete opposites. So everybody's different.
So you're effectively going from 6 until 9 without food. So it's basically a 15-hour fast, isn't it?
Yeah. I usually do that.
And actually that sounds very reasonable.
Yeah.
Like,
for me, it's normal. You know?
Yeah.
And I would say I always kind of ate like that, because in Switzerland, we always eat early. So it's not like in the southern countries where you have dinner at 10. You know, I would not be able to do that. So tend to eat early at 6, and then, that's it.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Kristina.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's been very insightful. And I know that the work that you do is very, very impactful for so many people. And I was really keen to get yourself on here to talk about food, because what I'm trying to do with the podcast is try to bring as many aspects of health as possible, because we know that you can't just look at one thing.
Very true.
You need to look at everything if you want to get the most optimal health possible. So, I really enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you.